how good can San Francisco be?
Yeah, I used that comparison actually in a column earlier this week. If he's Jalen Hurts last year, they can go to the Super Bowl, like no doubt in my mind. And the reason why is because this offense is already hard enough for teams to stop.
You got your Mag guys here on Birch 365. McDonald, McMullen, and Conor Orr, good enough to hop aboard with us, fellow Jerseyite NFL writer for Sports Illustrated. Conor, you going back to work? You ready for some football, bud?
Oh, it snuck up on us this year, you know? The football preview issue for Sports Illustrated closed last week. I worked all summer, so we don't get any time off.
We never get any downtime. You're right. You're right, Tom. People don't realize football, right? That my wife to this day, she's lived with me for I don't know how long. I can't say it loud in the home studio, but she still says, "Well, football's over. What are you going to do?" I'm like, "What are you? You've been watching it for this long." She still says the same thing every year. It's amazing. It never ends. The calendar is amazing, but so let's start with Kyler Murray, just because I find this story so interesting. Obviously, the Cardinals went all in from a financial perspective. They had to. Tremendously talented player. But then you have the leak of the contract, which is, the contract language, which is rare. It happens occasionally, but rare. And this independent study clause, which was wild to me. I mean, why would that even enter your mind, Conor Orr, if there wasn't a problem? I mean, who's thinking about that? To put it in a contract if it's not a problem.
It's interesting from a lot of different perspectives, right? I mean, you don't want to do any source guessing here, but the league's own media arm was the place that broke the story, right? So you wonder if the Cardinals wanted this out there in some way, shape, or form to sort of shame Kyler Murray into doing his homework. And if you had to go through those lengths in order to make something like that happen, is he really a guy that you want to commit 5 years and $240 million to? And, I've seen it as this instance of this brilliant 3D chess move by the Cardinals, but I mean, this isn't an organization.
I see it the opposite way.
Yeah, right? This isn't an organization that's played a whole lot of brilliant 3D chess in my mind over the last 5 years. So I don't know why they would start now, sort of being this team that does all these brilliant things that we can't comprehend.
Yeah. By the way, real quick, just as a follow up, sorry, Jody.
No, go ahead.
Did you get any sticker shock from that contract as well? I mean, we know how it works with and Deshaun Watson, so it's about timing and circumstance. But still, when I start thinking about these contracts and where they're going, we still have Lamar. We still have then it's going to be Joe Burrow, Justin Herbert. I can't even imagine what that's going to start at. Any sticker shock at all when you see these quarterback contracts?
A little bit. It's interesting, like with Aaron Rodgers getting to 50, you see the market kind of fall in. And so we're not at the old formula, right? Where it's like 50, 50.5, 51, and Jared Goff and Carson Wentz really changed that a couple of years ago, where they took below market slightly in order for them to get the security. But I think we're getting back to something closer to the old formula, right? Where it's going to be, I got to beat the next best guy by $500,000. And then it's just, unless it's Aaron Rodgers, unless it's Patrick Mahomes, then I got to beat the next guy. And so to me, that didn't surprise me, although the contract is, like we said, incentive laden. So with Kyler, yes, the average annual value, which is all agents care about, is up there, but I don't know at the end of his career how much money he's taking home compared to some of the other guys that are up there. And so with all these things, you have to just look at it through a magnifying glass.
Speaking of a sticker shock quarterback, that would be the guy who everybody's attention was grabbed when he signed this offseason, Deshaun Watson, because he got a completely guaranteed $230 million deal. He's practicing with the Cleveland Browns. I thought there'd be no way he'd be practicing with the Cleveland Browns. We know he's going to get some kind of punishment. Maybe I shouldn't say that, because some people have speculated he may get a complete pass. That would floor me, but just the fact that he is still practicing, and we have not heard from Judge Sue Robinson yet as to how much his punishment should be. Is there a backstory here, Connor? Is it just her doing her due diligence and not being dictated to by the NFL calendar? Are there influences here that we're not factoring in? I'm admitting I'm like, you can knock me over with a feather with the fact that this is dragged into past when the Browns are opening up camp. What do you make of the timing of this entire procedure?
I think the fact that it's taken this long is a good thing. I mean, the NFL wanted to outsource the judiciary process because it was clear that, after Greg Hardy and Ray Rice, Roger Goodell was not fit to handle something like this, right? And so if you're outsourcing it into a court-like process, you would want it to resemble the one that, we have installed in this country, and hopefully that, it takes time and it takes patience and due diligence, and that it doesn't really matter if he's practicing because, they can just yank him off the field one day and it doesn't really matter. My concern is, I go back to the beginning of this process, and the NFL pretty immediately early on leaked that they wanted a year plus indefinite, and they don't do things not strategically, right? And so why did they do that? I think they did that because they know they're not going to get it. And I think that they have no interest in appealing this system that they just set up and having Goodell overrule in the first major instance of that. And so I think they know they're not getting a year. I think they wanted to look tough. And I think at this point, they know that this thing's going to fall between, the reports are 2-8 games. I mean, that sounds right to me.
And I think you're right, Connor, as far as your take on that. Now, when it comes to a potential appeal, 8 games, I think they'd be fine with. And I think they just would lean on, all right, this is the system. That's what Sue decided. She's a former judge. We can live with it. We don't like it. But 2 games? Do you think that if they went that and see, here is what, and we've talking to a couple of lawyers as well, judges sort of lean on precedent. And the precedent here shouldn't be 8 games. You can go back to Ray Rice. Ray was 2 games. I forget what Greg Hardy was. Now, I think Ben and Ezekiel Elliott were 6 games. They tend to lean on that precedent. So if she goes in that lower end, 2 games, you think that could cause a problem, because then the league's going to get killed from the perspective of everybody's going to blame them. Oh, you get 2 games and you can have all these allegations of sexual misconduct. That's the NFL. That's a bad look on the NFL. Do you think that presses the issue a little bit more?
Here's what I think that the NFL isn't planning for. Roger Goodell, I think, assumes that everybody is as up to date on the NFL judiciary process as the 3 of us or any of the national writers or any of the beat writers who cover the league from a day in and day out process. My guess is if I went out in my yard, my neighborhood, and interviewed 6 of my neighbors and said, did you know that the NFL is an independent judiciary process? Or who do you think suspends the players in the NFL? 6 out of 6 people would say Roger Goodell, right? Yep. And so that's his problem, right? If Deshaun Watson gets 2 games, that's Roger Goodell's problem. That's on Roger Goodell's legacy. He set this system up. He's going to choose not to appeal, which I would be shocked if he appeals and drags this out. And, that's going to be another thing that he's going to have to wear around his neck, just like he's had to wear Ray Rice. I mean, that was an embarrassment for the league. And I think if Deshaun Watson gets 2 games, it's going to be an absolute embarrassment for the NFL.
Right. And I talked to someone we all know, Eric Edholm, during the weekend, and he made a good point where he goes, wait a minute. Can you actually give less games to Deshaun Watson than you do to Calvin Ridley for putting in a couple parlays? No, that just there may be people that don't understand the whole judiciary position, but they'll understand that. Wait a minute, guy put in a couple of bets, and he's going to miss more games than a guy who had to settle 20 some odd lawsuits because of sexual harassment. They've got to be very careful with how they handle it. All right, another quarterback situation, how they handle it will be very intriguing to me. Is Jimmy Garoppolo, Connor. Past his physical, will be showing up at camp shortly. Won't necessarily be asked to throw right away, but that'll come within the next week or two. The 49ers seem to have completely committed to Trey Lance. Anytime the coach talks about it, it's always about they've come along and are better in the OTAs and the team is rallied behind. They've basically written Jimmy Garoppolo off before they've actually parted ways, either via trade and or a release. Is it going to be ugly when Jimmy G shows up?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I think Jimmy wants to go too. I think I think everybody's waiting. I think the weird thing is, why hasn't any other team kind of already lined themselves up? And why haven't we seen someone sort of stacking their deck already to put in a spot where Jimmy Garoppolo can just walk in and be their quarterback? I think we all thought, oh, maybe that's why the Texans are waiting and they're just sticking with Davis Mills. I said in our podcast a month ago, I still think the Dolphins are the right move. I think he knows Mike McDaniel well. I think he could go in there and challenge Tua, and there wouldn't be much of a drop off. I mean, I think he'd be a market improvement over Tua, and he knows the division really well. But I think right now,
another Tua hater heard from
Jody loves Tua.
Put Orr on the com check mark. Yeah. Conor Orr, another Tua hater.
He loves Tua. I don't see the evidence
year this year. Breakout year for Tua.
I hope you're right.
I think if you had to pay $30 million for Tyreek Hill to turn 3-yard gains into 5-yard gains, I think you're in a bit of a precarious roster position.
Did you mean 5-yard gains, or did you mean 15 or 25 yards? There's a number missing before that. You didn't put it there.
Now, Connor, Tyreek has said that's the most accurate quarterback in football. Tua, so we'll see how that works out for him. But let's shift gears a little bit to Kyle Shanahan, because he's involved in this Garoppolo situation. It's been evident to me since the divisional round of the playoffs, when they went to the Super Bowl, when he threw that interception to Eric Kendricks, that he literally turned it off and said, you know what? This quarterback can't win me football games. I have to win games a certain way. I have to build around a very good running game. They've been able to do that. They made that run to the Super Bowl. They made another run. They almost made the Super Bowl. I would argue if Nick Bosa didn't get hurt, they probably would have been up there again, to be honest. Very good football team that has been able to win with a game manager quarterback at a pretty significant level. If Trey Lance is even, I don't know, 15th best quarterback, but can make some plays, if he's Jalen Hurts, we'll use Philadelphia, how good can San Francisco be?
Yeah, I used that comparison actually in a column earlier this week. If he's Jalen Hurts last year, they can go to the Super Bowl, no doubt in my mind. And the reason why is because this offense is already hard enough for teams to stop, but none of the teams that run this offense, and it's 40% of the NFL now, none of the teams that run this offense have a mobile quarterback. So think about that. Aaron Rodgers is probably the most, Ryan Tannehill, probably the most mobile quarterbacks that run that system. And it's all about math, right? It's, defensive ends have to choose who to block. You can manipulate the front, but if you have a running quarterback, it changes the math on teams that already don't have the numbers in the box to stop this offense, right? And so you're just obliterating any chance that these teams have to get a hold on your offense. And that's why I was so excited about Trey. That was the reason they picked him in the first place. And I just think maybe it's because he hasn't grasped sort of the baseline rules. There's a lot of rules in Kyle Shanahan's offense, right? If he hasn't grasped those baseline rules, whatever it is. But I think when he gets it and when the rubber meets the road, I think this thing's going to take off. And I think it's going to be really, really hard to stop, because there's a reason that half the teams in the NFL are running this offense, because no one can stop it. And then if you change the parameters of it again, you're one step ahead, you're going to be in a really good spot.
Connor, since you brought up Jalen Hurts, actually, John brought him up, and you said, yeah, I already went down that road with you, John. Give us your read on Jalen Hurts. Everyone is expecting an improvement from Jalen this year. Is it this much, or is it this much, and that could probably dictate how good the Eagles season is going to be. How much improvement do you see out of the Eagles quarterback?
I think it'll be a little bit. I think that, to all goad ourselves into thinking that there's some unseen ceiling here is probably irresponsible. I think he's good, and he's going to be a fine quarterback. And I think he's schemed up really well. I think with the offensive line that they still have and the pass catching weapons that they still have, you're going to be able to turn, let's say without all those tools, he would have been the 22nd best quarterback in the NFL. You're probably able to turn him high upside into like the 13th best quarterback in the NFL this year. That's pretty good. And you have a really good coaching staff. You have a really good, you have a lot of good personnel. And so, I don't think it's outside of the realm of possibility that they win the NFC East. I don't think that's crazy by any stretch of the imagination. But, is he going to be rewriting any NFL record books anytime soon? No. I mean, is he even going to be Wentz at the height of Wentz? I don't think so. I don't think the tools and the gifts, like the natural God-given stuff, is there, but that doesn't mean he can't be more effective in terms of leading them to more wins over the course of his career.
Conor, what you mentioned when we were talking about the San Francisco offense, about 40% of the league is running a similar scheme. The Eagles defense looks like it's going to go into more of a Vic Fangio style defense or Brandon Staley version of Rick Fangio's defense. How many teams are running sort of that Fangio inspired system? Have you looked into that? And if Vic is this well respected, why the heck is Vic out of a job as a head coach? And I think everybody would line up to have him as a defensive coordinator, but and he'll probably be able to pick a spot next year. Is it just that this league prefers offensive minds when it comes to head coaches?
Yeah, I thought, and listen, I mean, I had Nathaniel Hackett as my number one coaching candidate in September of last year. So, I thought it was a great hire, but I thought it was crazy not to give him a quarterback and see what he could have done in Denver. I mean, he had those teams competitive with Drew Lock and Trevor Siemian and Brock Osweiler. It was just, Chetty Bridgewater. And so I think there were some real lean times there. And I think he actually coached that team up pretty well. But to answer your first question, I would say about 90% of the NFL is running that defense now. I mean, but it went from Seattle cover 3.
Yeah.
And then, you saw that kind of phase out, and now it's this kind of stalified version of the Vic Fangio defense. And defensive, it's smart. I mean, if you have Patrick Mahomes, if you have Joe Burrow, if you have all these big guys that can extend plays and these fast wide receivers, why not just put a lid on that offense and force them to be more accurate in the, whatever it is, the 5 to 15 yard range? And that's why we saw the Bengals make the Super Bowl, because Joe Burrow could still do it. Some of these other guys can't. And so I think it's effective because it's always been effective. And, it's just funny. We give all these coaches, like, we always say, oh, they're brilliant, they're geniuses, but Vic's been running this defense for a really long time.
Yeah.
Bothering people with this for a really, really long time. Why did it take until 3 years ago for everyone to say, holy smokes, this is a great idea, we should all be running this?
Now, but to follow up on that, Conor, at some point, are there diminishing returns if everybody's doing the same thing? Because then it becomes, all right, who does it best, rather than I sort of have a trick that nobody else has. You have to be careful with that sort of line.
Yeah, and that's why the Ravens and the Patriots make the playoffs every year, because they don't care, right? And they do what everybody else doesn't do. And there are some teams that make a living off of that too. And I think that's, to me, that's a mark of a truly good organization in a franchise. Like the Patriots went 3-4 defense when everyone was doing 4-3 because they could get good athletes that nobody else could use in their defense. And then they built a Super Bowl dynasty out of it. And the Ravens were getting big guys and mobile quarterbacks when nobody wanted them. And they're putting together a perennial playoff team that's really talented. And so I think that there's certainly something to be said for that strategy. But if you're a defensive coordinator and you got to hang on to your job, and you're just sitting there in your cubicle and you have no say over personnel. Like sometimes that Fangio defense is just a really nice patchwork that you can put over things and make a lot of problems go away.
All right, Connor, I need your take on this, because if there's one story that I've read in the last 24 hours that had me shaking my head, it was this one. At Patriots camp, Matt Patricia is calling plays on offense for the Patriots. The former defense coordinator of the Patriots, the former head coach of the Lions, who was summarily dismissed pretty damn quickly, is calling offensive plays for the Patriots. The Patriots don't have a named offensive coordinator. It's now looking like it's Matt Patricia. Is Belichick going soft or crazy?
My coworker Albert Breer had some insight into this that I thought was interesting, and then I'll kind of mix him a little bit of what I think. But his take was that, basically you want guys who are not as obsessed or as deep into this offense as Josh McDaniels was, because when Josh and Tom were together for 20 years, the offense got really inaccessibly complicated, right? Because they could keep building on it and building on it and building on it. And then when Mac Jones came in last year, you basically had this biblical tome of an offense. And I think what they needed to do is they needed to tear it down, because Mac is trying to catch up on stuff that took Tom Brady 20 years to learn, right? And that's tough, right? And so what you need to do is you need to break that down to its essence. And I think that by pairing that with guys who, listen, every coach, I think, has an ability to, except for Rex Ryan, who couldn't draw plays the opposite way. And he told me that once. Every coach has the ability to do offense and defense, right? I mean, you're that steeped in the game, you're going to be able to do this in some way, shape, or form. And I think that these guys know the offense intimately anyway, but they can probably come at it from a fresh perspective and just introduce the basics, the tent poles to Mac, and let him learn the offense with time and take it with him. And my other take on this is that with Joe Judge too in the mix, you're introducing two play callers that have absolutely no tendencies in the NFL, which I think is interesting, because every offensive coordinator, someone told me this after the Super Bowl, that 4th and 1 play that the Bengals ran where Aaron Donald sacked Joe Burrow and the Super Bowl was over. They had run essentially the same play in the same situation a bunch of times last year. So the Rams just knew what was going to happen. And so with Joe Judge and Matt Patricia, if you don't know who's calling the plays, you don't know what they're going to call, what they like to call, what they've called in the past. And so, sure, does that mystique run out after a year or so? Yeah, but it also buys your quarterback a nice little runway of unpredictability.
Do you think people in the NFL, Connor, are too obsessed with titles, too accept, Bill doesn't, we said it the other day, we don't care about titles. And they go about things a different way. Now he has the gravitas to get away with that kind of stuff. Whereas, a young coach would, if they tried that, they'd be just killed from day one. So part of it is that. But even from a labeling system, like here in Philadelphia, people are obsessed with, are they going to run a 4-3 or 3-4? And the real answer is neither. But so many can't accept that. Whether the difference between edge rusher out in Minnesota, they're changing to the more Vic Fangio style defense, and Daniil Hunter is going to be, an outside linebacker. Really, he's an edge rusher. I mean, why? If you want to label them, you label them correctly. Do you think the NFL and people around the NFL, whether it's fans or media, whomever, are too obsessed with titles? It's a pet peeve of mine.
Yes, in a broader sense, I think if you're an NFL coach in particular, I think titles, with Bill Belichick's team, it doesn't matter, because if you're on that staff, you're getting a head coaching job at some point, or you're pretty sure that you're getting a head coaching job at some point, right? But if you are the running backs coach and not the run game coordinator, that you have probably like a 90% less chance of getting interviewed for jobs. And so for those guys in particular, I think titles are essential. And, there are certain mechanisms within the rules, right? You can get blocked for certain jobs, not blocked for certain jobs. Yeah. If you have titles, that stuff matters. Everything else doesn't matter. I stopped asking. I mean, when I was a beat writer in 2010, I would always ask coaches, well, what kind of defense do you run? You're a nickel. I mean, that's what you run.
It's a base.
You're running nickel. Maybe a couple teams run, a little bit heavier of a dime presence, but that's the real difference here. It's between nickel and dime. It's a 3-4 and a 4-3. Doesn't really matter. I looked at the base defense stats the other day, and I think like maybe one team was in their base defense like more than 40% of the time last year, and that was a big number that surprised me. So, yeah, I mean, a lot of this stuff doesn't matter. Now, the other time that titles matter, I mean, we saw this with the tight ends fighting for stuff, right? If you're trying to get
contract,
if you're trying to not get pigeonholed into a certain franchise tag category, I remember Jimmy Graham doing this years ago, saying I'm a wide receiver and I deserve to get paid by it. That stuff matters. But the way that we look at things, I think from a traditional fan / media perspective, I mean, a lot of this stuff doesn't matter, even to the point where, you're looking at a guy and you're saying, oh, he's the offensive coordinator. But, if you look at how offenses work now, like, yes, one guy has the responsibility of calling the plays, but all the plays that go into that are, the quarterback's coach comes up with some, the wide receiver coach comes up with some. None of these guys are actually coaching the wide receivers or the quarterbacks. They're all, miniature offensive coordinators, you know what I mean? And so I think that, a lot of this stuff we get a little too worked up about for no reason.
All right. I appreciate John's question because it reminded me of a question I wanted to ask you. Speaking of nitpicking and things that bother us, the last couple of years, more often than not, but there have been a couple of years where it hasn't popped up, point of effort from the referees. That the NFL competition committee decides we're going to make a concerted effort to clean this up. And they throw flags all over the place in preseason games. And it gets annoying to watch those preseason. Not again. And they do so. Sometimes it carries over into the season. Sometimes it's just they're making a point in the preseason. So it gets in the players' heads. We don't want you doing this going forward. What am I looking for this year? What is going to be, or is there even going to be, a point of emphasis in the way they call games that we're going to have to work our way through in preseason?
I remember when I was a beat writer, we used to get a presentation on that. Like the officials would actually come to our camps and say, hey, this was the year. Like, I remember the last one I got was maybe like the running backs lowering with the crown of the helmet. I remember
they had the Adrian Peterson video. With him.
It was I felt like I was in high school again.
You and Kyler Murray got to go back to school. Make sure they'll punish you if you don't put your time in.
Yeah, Sports Illustrated has a big no video game clause in my contract too. I think it's one of those things where minus if I'm sure we'll see that come out at some point this preseason. I'm sure people will start talking about that, but if not, we're gonna know by the first 5 minutes of the first Hall of Fame game what it is. I think for me it's fine. It's a fine. Like it's annoying, but it's okay. But I think what concerns me is like you're one of these kids that's trying to make the roster and hang on as like as the 50th guy, and if a coach is just looking at a spreadsheet at the end of that thing and you had 3 penalties in the preseason, but it was just used to make a point for somebody and then you get whacked off the roster. I don't think that's fair, other than that, it's like, okay, I understand why you're doing it. Most people, don't watch the preseason anyway, unless they got a real gambling problem. And so, it is what it is. Or they have to write about it, which is the other people watching the preseason.
At Conor Orr, follow Conor on Twitter, 1N, as you see it there on the screen. You can read them at si.com/NFL, the Monday morning quarterback. Conor, I'll leave you with sort of, I need one surprise team. We know the heavyweights, the Super Bowl favorites. One potential surprise team on both sides of the docket, AFC, NFC. One that might break out. One that might be the Cincinnati Bengals from last year.
Are the Eagles too good to be the surprise?
No, I don't. Yeah. I think you got the Bucs, you got the Packers, you got the Rams. I think everybody defaults to them. I think the Eagles, you're going to make a lot of people very happy here.
I think my 3 candidates in the NFC would be the Eagles. I think the Lions, because
not
Jared Goff
Wow.
had
Now
Not
that would
you
be a big
too.
one.
Oh,
That
my
would be a
God.
big one. The
Jared
Lions.
Goff was 11 touchdowns, 2 picks over the end of the year last year. I think he's coming around, and they have a really good receiver. I mean, that receiving core is going to be pretty formidable, I think. Or the Vikings, just because I want to see what Kirk Cousins looks like in an offense that is not completely run game oriented, right?
With a coach that doesn't hate him.
Yeah, and a coach that doesn't dislike him. The AFC is harder because it's so top heavy. You know what I mean? And we
Yeah.
know all the teams that are going to be really good. I would say if the Dolphins got Jimmy G, I would put the Dolphins in that category just because I like
You're
the
killing Jody.
offense.
You're killing Jody.
But I mean, I don't know if the Patriots qualify again as like a team
Yeah,
that can
they
be
qualify now.
as
I
a
would
surprise team, but I think we're all forgetting that it's still one of the best coached teams in the history of the NFL. But yeah, like I said, the AFC is tougher because I don't even know if the Bengals are surviving that division this year, with Baltimore being healthy.
Yeah,
And,
nobody talks about Tennessee, and they were the #1 seed last year, and nobody talks about them.
The Colts, I think, are another team that, I don't think we're giving Matt Ryan nearly enough credit. I mean, that was a bad situation that he left, and I think he's going to be re-energized there. I think they could be really good this year.
All right. I'm glad at least we can agree on that because you're just beating the snot out of Tua Tagovailoa. We're going to have you back on again, Mr. Orr, when Tua's putting up massive numbers a month into the season. We'll probably have on before that, but after a month when the Dolphins are 3-1 and Tua's playing great. Oh, I'm going to get you back on again because I'm a Tua fan, and he is one of those lightning rod players that people seem to fall into one category or the other. You and I going mano a mano. I'm good with that. Kind of great stuff. Appreciate you coming on board. Thank you very much for a solid 25 minutes with us today. We'll get you back on again, big guy.
All right, looking forward to it. Thank you, guys.
Kind of.